Did you know that in the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, there are close to 40 times when we're told that people were astonished or amazed or astounded at Jesus or at something he said or did? Now, human beings are not astounded when things go just as we expect, or when the day is the normal, been there, done that kind of day. When we're astounded, it's because something unexpected is happening, and we're thrown off kilter. And normally we have one of two responses. Either we reject what is so unexpected, what has startled us, and cling to what we know, so that our lives return to what we consider their normal balance. This is sometimes appropriate. Or we choose to let ourselves be unbalanced, even knowing perhaps that our lives will never be the same afterwards. God does have a way at times of nudging us slightly off kilter, of surprising us, of doing the unexpected. Sometimes this is just when we're feeling comfortable, or just when we think we've figured it all out or seen it all, and nothing more can surprise us. Easter itself tends to put us off kilter, as it put the friends of Jesus off kilter. The women who were the first witnesses to the resurrection were astonished and also frightened, we read. Luke tells us that they were terrified. And Matthew quotes the angel at the tomb, urging them not to be afraid. The followers of Jesus were astonished by the resurrection, yes, but also by its implications, because Easter called them and calls us to a new level of being. It was that their whole outlook on life had to change. And so they felt astonished, amazed, and off-balanced. Why? First, when bodies have been buried, they usually stay where they're put. And because when people are dead, it's generally assumed they are going to stay dead. Next, because although a strong segment of the Jewish population believed in resurrection, they expected it at the end time, not right now. So it was not just that they had their friend and leader back with them in the flesh, at least temporarily. It was that an element of their belief system was shaken. And there was something else that they were learning. How does God act toward enemies? Is God a God of vengeance? Vengeance seems to be the natural human response to our enemies. So what would the disciples think the response of Jesus would be to being unjustly captured, arrested, and executed once he had come back from the dead in power and glory? What about the disciples themselves? Peter, who had denied him, the others who had run off. Benjamin Myers, an Australian theologian at the University of Queensland, wrote, "But after Easter, what does the crucified and risen Jesus do? Does he respond to his execution by marshaling that legion of angels he refused to deploy on Golgotha, smashing his way into the imperial palace with shock and awe, overwhelming the hopelessly outgunned royal guard, and exacting a righteous and terrible revenge on Pilate, who, of course, was a ruthless tyrant long before his showdown with Jesus? Does he round up those reprehensible disciples, perhaps hood and humiliate them, or at the very least, give them a tongue lashing they'll never forget and send them away in guilt and despair? None of the above. No violence, no vengeance, no payback. And that's the end of the quotation. In fact, we learn that Jesus ignores the high priest and the Romans and comes back to the same people who had claimed to be his friends, but who had denied him and run off and left him when he most needed them. And what does he do? Does he put up a blog, perhaps, detailing all their failings and all the times they misunderstood him, and telling the world how faithless and cowardly they have been, and that they are certainly not qualified to lead his church? No, he goes to them and says, "Peace be with you. Do not be afraid." They need to hear this. Do not be afraid, because they might well think that they would be the object of divine wrath after what they had done. But there is no violence, no vengeance in Jesus, which means there is no violence, no vengeance in God. This is definitely a countercultural notion and throws us off balance. And we sometimes have a hard time taking it in. Even after the supreme revelation of God in Jesus, we sometimes still think that God is out to get us if we do something wrong. And we sometimes still think that we can follow Jesus and be violent ourselves and be vengeful ourselves. Do not be afraid, Jesus tells the disciples after the resurrection. There is no need to be afraid, because God is not out to get us, sinners though we be. There is no need to be afraid, because not even death can win out over the goodness of God and the life offered us, a life that is filled with the living God. There is no need to be afraid, because in spite of all appearances to the contrary, love and goodness have triumphed. The gifts of the resurrection carry with them also a marvelous responsibility. For through the tender mercy of God, who forgives us our sins and keeps coming back to us, even when we turn away, through the love of God in whom there is no violence or vengeance, through the power of God whose goodness triumphs over evil, we, puny creatures that we are called to let ourselves be transformed into the good and merciful and peaceful presence of Christ for the world. And perhaps the first step is to let the Paschal mystery throw us off balance a bit this Easter season. We have heard it read to us so often that it may have become old hat to us. May we gaze on it with fresh eyes. May we be still and let it call to us, amaze us, fill our hearts, and comfort us.